Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The school department in Smithfield with a proposal where teachers would be required to out trans students to their parents. And this past weekend, there was a discussion, essentially a community forum that took place in Smithfield that assessed and with public input tried to make decisions about this proposal. Steve, thanks so much for your time. Take us through this story. And I mean, it just feels like it is another one of these culture war garbage type situations with real world consequences for students who in many cases have the potential for severe risk if they're quote unquote exposed to people at home.
Yeah, thank you. I was put onto the story because concerned parents in Smithfield contacted me and said, do you see what's going on here in Smithfield? And I had heard some things about the new Republican majority on the Smithfield School Committee. Right, they had to fire a teacher who had made some comments about had taught a class about racism. They had done some other things. I hadn't really been able to get in there, but then they said they're looking to revise the policy on transgender, gender nonconforming, and transitioning students. And I said that's weird because I remember when this went into effect in 2016, and then was made statewide mandatory in 2018 under Ken Wagner. So I went to the meeting. And that was on April 18th. So that's a while back now. And it was weird because it seemed like they were talking in a way that did not understand the issue of what it means to transition. They clearly did not see any differences between social transitioning and medical transitioning, right? In the sense that if a student who's in 9th or 10th grade says, hey, I want to use they, them pronouns or she, her pronouns instead of male, he, him, or whatever they are, I need to be able to use a bathroom that's in accordance with my gender identity, but I don't necessarily need mom and dad to find out yet because I'm not really sure how to tell them. I'm working through those issues. I'm working through my thoughts on this. I'm working, puberty is weird when you're straight het guy, right? Like, what are my thoughts? What's going on in my head, right? What does consent mean? All these things go through your head when you're growing up. And it takes a while to learn that, to figure that out. And sometimes you might love your parents, you might trust your parents, but there might be a thing where my dad has said things in the past, like I was proud to have a young, I'm growing up to be a great little man or whatever it is. And then the next thing I know, it's like, well, dad, I'm actually a girl, could be tough. And I don't necessarily want to deal with that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a student might not want to tell their parents, but in the first early meetings, they were constantly conflating it with giving kids hormones in schools or sneaking them out of the school to be for medical treatment or something. And it was really weird because that just doesn't happen, right? It isn't a thing. The kids that's not what teachers are doing. What teachers are doing is they're giving them emotional and social support. Other students are giving them social and emotional support to work through these issues. And so hearing, and I hate to use words that just big, but strong, but there was a lot of ignorance up there, and there was a lot of fear mongering, and some of that came out through public comment. But for the most part, public comment from both students and parents and social workers and medical authorities over the 3 meetings that I attended where anybody talked about this at all. The vast majority of people were saying, "Why are we even doing this? This is a policy that works." There was a person, his name was Henry, I'm going to look up his last name here quick. Henry Serravo, right? He's a student. He actually had, on the Smithfield School Committee, they have a position for a student to sit on a committee in a non-voting capacity. to advise them, to talk to them, right? So he was that student. I think he's one of 2 students doing that. And he identifies as gay. And he spoke very eloquently, at least 2 of the meetings, about what are we talking about here? Why are we doing this? This policy has saved lives. This policy has made Smithfield, over the 4 years that one young person was there, Ellery, they spoke and said how they have, over the 4 years they've been at Smithfield High School, they felt safer and safer over the years. They've built something really good by using these programs, by following these ideas and doing this. And trans students feel protected, safe, and can do what they need to do. And yet there's a majority, 3-person majority on this city council or school committee who are pushing to make changes to mandate the outing of trans students under any circumstance. And the circumstance specifically outlined by committee chair Iannatelli was that if the moment they declare they want to use a different bathroom, the parents are involved. And by a different bathroom, I mean a bathroom that's in line with their gender identity, then the parents are immediately involved. It's a dangerous policy. It's going to be difficult, and it's also right now under the law completely illegal. You're not allowed to do that. It is completely violating the law. If they were to do this, I can't speak for the ACLU, but they sent a very strong letter suggesting that if this happens, they will be bringing a lawsuit. I expect they would, bring a lawsuit where this happened. And worse, despite the fact that even at this most recent workshop meeting they had Saturday morning, which went on for 4 hours, okay, 29 people, mostly residents of Smithfield, spoke against changing the policy. 11 people, about half of whom or more were not residents of Smithfield, spoke in favor of changing the policy. And I'm like, this is just great. Not one actual expert got up and spoke in favor of changing the policy. The experts that they do know are notable for being way outside the mainstream on educational policy concerning, gender nonconforming kids. It was clearly ideologically driven, and it was clearly in line with a national right-wing attack on trans rights everywhere. So I think that sets the stage anyway, if you want to ask me some more questions.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the 11 that spoke in favor of changing the policy, and many of them not being from Smithfield. This seems to be consistent with a lot of this area of the front lines, if you will, in the culture wars, were some of the folks that were there in that capacity, some of the usual suspects that turn up at events statewide and sort of advocate for these types of policies?
Yeah. There was a man, and I'm going to not remember his name, but he was one of the people who spoke in Westerly recently in favor of a resolution to ban books in public schools, right? One of the women who spoke, her name is, and people know her, Jessica Sala. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Nicole Solis, right? Who's an outspoken parents' right advocate. Parents' rights meaning that parents, honestly, the way people talk is something like, sounds like, almost like owning your children rather than raising your children. And honestly, and I'll just say this, she is a South Kingston resident. She's given the South Kingston School Committee a lot of, I don't want to say trouble. She's outspoken and she has a right to her opinions. And when she gets up in front of the South Kingston School Committee, for sure, she's an opinion and she has a strong opinion. Whether you like it or not, she has every right to advocate for herself. However, and she also has a right to speak, I think, in the Smithfield School Committee, but she literally tells them, call the ACLU's bluff. Let yourself be sued. I'm like, this isn't your tax dollars we're talking about. It's like me going to your house and saying, shoot it out with the cops. Maybe he'll, it's like, don't turn yourself in. Just go out there and fight the police or something. And it's like, what is that to me? Nothing, right? That's just me watching from the sidelines, watching you get beat up. And I think from her opinion, she's like, Yeah, and then she goes right into some like pretty, you know, dark terms. She says something like, parents are not the enemy of their own children, but they are the enemy of the radical trans cultists who
Ooh.
prey upon the vulnerabilities of children to promote their political agenda. Now, this is the kind of stuff we're seeing coming out of like the right wing Republican and even more like just the right wing white supremacist this rhetoric we're hearing more and more of. Did you notice on the national news front, Trump's surprise that when he spoke about tax cuts, he got a smattering of applause from his people and his base. But when he spoke about trans rights, he got cheers and whoops and screams like he's going to roll those back. And like, he's on stage surprised. Oh, I talk about tax cuts. But I talk about this, and whoa, the reaction. See, he's not setting policy. He's like surfing on top of policy, right? Or not surfing on top of public wave of public hate and public opinion. So he doesn't care who they hate. He's just going to like say, yep, you hate him, I hate him. Immigrants, I hate him. Muslims, I hate him. Whatever it is, trans people now are his latest bugaboo, and it's really dark. It's a really not. It's difficult because when you meet kids who are going through this, they need help, right? And I'm not talking about mental health. They need help in a sense of social emotive support, right? That's what these kids need more than anything. And I really and we also know that it's being trans does not make you more susceptible to wanting to take your own life. Being abused or marginalized or prejudiced against, that's what makes you feel like you want to take your own life, right? So being you and being accepted and leading a life where people just accept you and love you and help you and want for the best for you, that's all you need, no matter who you are. And they want, and it's easier for people who are straight, white, heterosexuals or whatever to get that kind of acceptance in the society. It's harder when you're in some way different and or not in the majority. And when we start picking on these minorities, then we're getting into places, and I've written about this elsewhere, we're getting into real, true fascism. And I don't want to back away from that word. I mean, I wrote a piece a while back about how, back when I was in Uprising, I wrote a piece about how when the Nazis came to power, there's that whole thing about first they came for the socialists, then they came for, and then when they came, right? But they didn't really first come for the socialists. They first came for the trans people. That was the first people they came for. And then as you look at the history, the very first big book burning was they went to an institute that studies sexuality, and they took all the books out and they burned them in the street in a big bonfire. This, right? They chased and hounded trans people. Remember, in the concentration camps, there were pink triangles as well as stars, Star of David's on the people, right? They hunted them as well. In fact, they hunted them first, right? And so this is what we're seeing today. This I believe is what we're seeing. We're seeing the hunting of trans people by these groups because they think this is a wedge issue that they can get some support for, and they want to force people either back to the closet or to detransition or to just die. And if they don't die on their own, and they get enough power, they'll start killing them themselves. So honestly, this is where we take a stand against fascism, is on this issue. And even though it seems small, a small school committee in Smithfield, it seemed probably small to people in Germany living at the time who didn't even notice that this was happening. The guy who wrote those famous words about first they came for the socialists, he was a supporter of the Nazis when it first started, right? He voted for the Nazi party. He was like, yeah, this is great. He didn't raise an eyebrow when the trans people and the gay people were being systematically wiped out and attacked. That wasn't the problem for him. It came later when he, after he thought about it and after they came for him and told him his sermons had to be a certain way and everything else. And all of a sudden he's like, whoa, wait a minute, where did this come from, right? So some people will listen to this and think I've gone way too far right now and talk about a fascist take over the country, and that's fine. But I don't think I'm going too far, and I think we need to take a stand right here, right now.
The seeds are planted, and they're clearly planted towards a worldview that is one of it's an extreme worldview in terms of just trying to control people for one's own, I guess, I don't even know if the right word is religious, but just sort of cultural standpoint.
Yeah.
But also, of course, with this comes, you mentioned Trump, significant political gain, significant power. And we see there's this sort of dual track of, yes, there are folks who deep down truly believe that if someone's transitioning, they're violating a worldview, a Judeo-Christian thing, or whatever right. That is. And then they overlap with those who seek, as you mentioned, to surf on those policies to rise to power. Right. That's the dangerous coalition right now that is formulating and has already won the presidency once and could very well do so again. So these front lines are, although, yes, it's Smithfield and it's a school committee and all this, that, and the other, and you can make an argument to dismiss it, and we'll talk in just a second about where this policy is heading. These seeds being planted, it's not the only garden that's growing right now. These things are happening all around the country, all around the world, frankly, and even zooming into Rhode Island, there are examples where these parents groups or whatever they are, they're totally committed through advocating for policy, showing up at meetings. Again, they're right, completely agree that they have the right to do so, writing quasi-journalism at times or opinion pieces, whatever it is, calling into talk shows, blasting people on Twitter, and attacking their enemies, political or otherwise, with as many personal demeaning attacks as they can. But this is a sophisticated effort. This isn't something that is just, here's the random concerned parent, and she bumped into another parent at a soccer game, and they said, boy, we're aligned in our worldview. This is a coordinated effort against, really, in plain terms, true freedom.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think that's exactly right. It's freedom for me, but not for you. I'll just say this, it's happening across the country, right? We see it. One of the people who spoke Saturday morning said, I don't want Smithfield, a town that I love, to be following this example set by Florida and Tennessee, a place where it's unsafe to be me, right? To be a student like me, or to be identified the way I identify. And I think that's extremely telling. We see what's happening in other states, and we know what people who are vying for bigger and bigger power want in this country. And that's why it's even more important that on a state level and on a city level that we stand against some of these worst impulses. It's not easy. I mean, believe me, like, you put out a piece like I put out, and you get a lot of pushback and a lot of people not liking it. And I mean, I'm not a politician, so I can easily block people on Twitter who get gross or weird, and I do that I don't know, probably have hundreds of people I've blocked over time, and it doesn't bother me, because my work isn't to try to convince them, the people on the most extreme edges. My work is to wake up some of the people in the fuzzy middle and say, hey, this is happening now. You might want to pay attention, even if it's not, and it's hard to pay attention, right? We're poorer than we've been ever. We have less money. Some of us are working 2 and 3 jobs. We're getting hit with medical bills and all sorts of things that are happening in the world. So being involved politically is harder than it's ever been, possibly. And yet, if we're not standing there, standing up to this, it's going to happen. And because we're just like going to wake up one day and say, what happened here? How did this policy pass? Smithfield School Committee can't pass this policy without being called out for it, right? We now have 4 or maybe even 5 meetings. I know I missed one somewhere, but where people have overwhelmingly said no to this policy. Overwhelmingly said this policy works. If it's not broken, why are you trying to fix it? Calling them out for their really, really bad being bad actors on this. And so they're not going to get away with this easily, but they will get away with it. And you mentioned, we'll get into where it's going on Wednesday night at 7:00. The Smithfield School Committee will be taking this. They have right on their agenda, it says, item number 8, to pass this, right? It doesn't say to discuss and pass or to consider. It says literally to pass this, the changes to the transgender nonconforming, the whole thing, right? That school policy. So I think they're full speed ahead. I think they've always been full speed ahead. I think all talk about discussions and coming up with better ideas has always been kind of a lie. They always knew they were heading this direction. I think Iannatelli and Vice Chair Jessica Sala, and maybe to a lesser extent, committee member Amanda Fafford, but I don't know. I think all three are pretty in lockstep. And I think the other two members of the council will just, I think it'll go 3-2. I mean, maybe it'll go the other way. Maybe there's a little bit of a miracle happening, but I think, and then I believe they'll be sued. It may cost Smithfield money. It might not. I mean, honestly, they might already know that they've got like the Alliance Defending Freedom or one of these other big right-wing groups ready to step up and pay for their defense. So that might be. And so if you see that happen, know that they've been talked to by these big right-wing groups, these national groups who want to come in and make Rhode Island a test case on this, and they want to take it on in our courts because there is a strong conservative group of people in the state who would love to make this a court case. So it might cost Smithfield money. Maybe they know they can get away with it and it won't cost them any money, which is too bad. But because I think I think it's going to hurt Smithfield overall. It's going to hurt their ability to be seen as a gracious, welcoming community. It's going to hurt their ability to be seen as as even decent people. And I tell you, I go to Smithfield for these things, and people up there are lovely, right?
Right.
It's really, I mean, it's really true. The vast majority of people there don't understand what's happening. They just want to take care of their kids and give their kids good educations. And everything I've seen at Smithfield High School has told me that this is a good school that does good things for its students. The teachers seem great. I'm an outsider, so I'm there. Like, I've been here maybe 12 hours in total. But I'll tell you, from what I've seen, and I've gone to a lot of communities, it's beautiful there. There's, people give a shit. Or, sorry,
no,
people
you're
care.
good. We're not bound by FCC regulations. We're good.
Fantastic, good. But people care, and it's great. I really want them to succeed here. So,
Steve Ahlquist, he reports now for steveahlquist.substack.com. Head over there and subscribe immediately, and you'll be able to follow along with Steve's excellent reporting in general and also on this issue, one that is, just like we said, seeds planted in this ongoing, seemingly expanding culture war and with real-world implications on many levels. Steve, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Bill.
We are brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, who are offering a cannabis certificate program. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what the best path to break into the cannabis field is, well, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online and can be completed in just 2 semesters. Learn more at uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280. We're brought to you in part by CCA Health Rhode Island. Commonwealth Care Alliance, or CCA, is a multi-state integrated care system influencing innovative models of complex care nationwide. CCA's Uncommon Care model focuses on sustainable and evidence-based healthcare breakthroughs that improve the health and well-being of people with significant needs, and is consistently recognized as one of the best models in the country at identifying and serving traditionally hard-to-reach individuals. CCA is excited to bring Uncommon Care to Rhode Islanders with a range of Medicare Advantage plans. Learn more by visiting commonwealthcarealliance.org/Rhode Island.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.